The Ministry of Truth has assured Canadians that they are better off because of the carbon tax. It costs them nothing. In fact, they're getting richer because of it. But a few weeks ago, we learned from the Parliamentary Budget Officer that the government has a secret report on the carbon tax. And after seeing some of the government's data, we understand why they're trying to hide it. The government's own data shows that the carbon tax costs every Canadian household nearly $2,000, and that Canadians are losing about $30 billion in economic activity because of the carbon tax. Canadians are exhausted by this government's doublespeak. They know what we know, that the carbon tax costs Canadians billions of dollars. Why does this Prime Minister continue to stand by his radical Environment Minister instead of standing up for Canadians?
Yeah. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, the truth is out about their punishing carbon tax. A partial government report leaked by the Liberals to the marketing arm of the Liberal Party of Canada, the CBC, revealed that when factoring for inflation, the Liberal carbon tax will leave a $30 billion hole in our economic activity. The carbon tax will cost every Canadian household almost $2,000. The Liberals' activist Environment Minister tried to silence the Parliamentary Budget Officer from exposing this report. This is unbelievable. The Environment Minister is not worth the cost. When will he resign?
Madam Speaker, the member opposite is fighting action against climate change at the very moment that houses in her own community are threatened by wildfires. We are trying to make sure that we save people's homes. We are protecting Canadian communities. She's busy letting the planet burn.
Honourable member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Madam Speaker, that's absolutely ridiculous, and the Liberals have been hiding the truth from Canadians. Right at the Finance Committee, the Parliamentary Budget Officer said, quote, "We've been told explicitly not to disclose it and reference it." The Liberals have been trying to muzzle the Parliamentary Budget Officer. And, the government holding much of this report from the public. The entire report must be released to expose the economic vandalism of the carbon tax. The Environment Minister is not worth the cost. Will he resign?
Yeah. Speaker, that member sure represents a beautiful part of Canada. The last time I was there, you could almost choke on the forest fire smoke. People in Kelowna, people in the Okanagan expect action on climate change. And they also know that 8 out of 10 of them pay less in price of pollution than they get back in rebates. That is the case across the country where the tax applies. Madam Speaker, we are acting on the environment. We are acting on affordability. The people of the Okanagan support that.
Madam Speaker, let's vote foreign interference. One leader says it's no big deal. Another says it's very grave. Both want us to take their word for it, and we're no further ahead. The Minister of Public Safety said on Monday that he wouldn't breach secrecy because RCMP Deputy Commissioner Mark Flynn warned him he would face criminal charges. Does the government think that all elected officials who consulted the documents should face the same charges? And does the government think we're any further ahead today with elected officials who are treading a fine line with the law? The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the Bloc because yesterday we passed a bill at third reading, a very important bill when it comes to foreign interference. And that adds to a long list of solutions and initiatives this government has put in place to combat foreign interference. We know that all countries in the world have to deal with this challenge, and Canada is distinguishing itself with the series of steps we've taken to strengthen our institutions and to counter foreign interference. The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Madam Speaker, there are two opposing versions. The Pollyanna, move along, nothing to see here, and the alarmist, call 911. We don't know if one or both are telling the truth. We don't know if one or both have given in to the lure of the spotlight. This accomplishes nothing except to build mistrust. And now, thanks to them, when the Hague Commission tables its report, there's a risk that one of the two camps, the Pollyannas or the alarmists, will question the Commission's findings. Is it too much to ask that elected officials be responsible, abide by the law, and let the judge do her work? The Honourable Minister. Of course, we want to allow Justice Hague to do her job, and that's why the House leaders have negotiated a very clear and broad mandate for that commission. We greatly appreciate Justice Hogg's work. And meanwhile, I don't know whether the bloc leader has stepped forward to consult these documents, which are confidential. The NDP leader did, the Green leader did.
Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Madam Speaker, in Edmonton, it's becoming increasingly hard to find an affordable place to live. Rents are up 20% since last year, and there simply isn't enough affordable housing. The Conservatives think building luxury condos will fix the problem, which is another example of them wanting to give money to their rich friends. But Canadian families need a home, and the Liberals aren't acting with the urgency necessary to build below-market, co-op, and supportive housing. When will this government get serious about affordable housing so that people in Edmonton can find a place to live? Thank you.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I wish the member would have attended this week's meeting at the House of Commons committee that's responsible for housing, Mr. Speaker. And Albertan Tim Richter from the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness made clear that this housing vision put forward by the government is the most ambitious in 40 years, and it's substantive. It's justified. There is proof points in everything we put forward, including co-op housing that she mentions. In fact, just a few days ago, the largest investment we've seen for co-op housing in the past 30 years. She talks about supportive housing. We've supplemented that in the most recent budget. In her community, she's seen support. 71,000 people lifted off.
The Honourable Member for Victoria.
Madam Speaker, as Canadians choke on smoke and flee from wildfires, Canada's biggest banks are handing out even more money to oil and gas companies. Under the Liberals, Canadian banks have become some of the biggest financiers of fossil fuels in the world. And the Conservatives are happy to let these banks put profits over our planet. Canadians are struggling with the cost of living and the climate emergency, while the banks fuel both of these crises to get even richer. So why are the Liberals letting big banks off the hook?
That's right.
Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for her question, and I would agree with her. We think that banks should be doing more when it comes to fighting climate change and putting money where their mouth is, which is why the Office of the Superintendent for Financial Institutions is putting in place measures to ensure that banks and other financial institutions disclose their climate risks, and we've also committed and put in place measures to ensure that we put in Canada a taxonomy principle so that we ensure that investments that are made that are be green, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Madam Speaker, the Liberals promised to be the most open and transparent government in history and said data paid for by Canadians belongs to Canadians. Well, that promise is just a sick joke after 9 years of secrecy and cover-ups. Yesterday, Common Sense Conservatives forced the NDP Liberal government to release some of the data that they had been suppressing, which proves that the carbon tax costs every Canadian family nearly $2,000. The Environment Minister has misled Canadians. When will he resign?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think that the people who should resign are the people who have hundreds of times voted against providing Canadians with clean air, clean water, protecting the environment. Not tens of times, hundreds of times, Madam Speaker. If anyone should resign in this House, it is this people. 8 out of 10 Canadians are better off because of carbon pricing, where the federal program applies. We're helping Canadians. We're fighting climate change. They're doing none of that.
Because this government only does the right thing when they get caught. They only disclose this information because Conservatives forced them to. This NDP government put a gag order on the Parliamentary Budget Officer because they didn't want Canadians to know the economic cost of the carbon tax. Per capita GDP is falling. The carbon tax makes life more expensive, proving that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. The Environment Minister has misled Canadians by hiding the truth. When will he resign?
Yes. Honourable Minister of Innovation.
I think we've answered that question many times. The sloppy Conservatives, we know where they're going. They're against climate change. They've resigned on acting on behalf of Canadians. They've resigned on taking the best side of the Canadians. They've resigned on future generation, Madam Speaker. Think about that. They will not stand up to fight for our kids and our grandkids. Climate change is the issue of our time, Madam Speaker, and they've resigned from this issue. So it's laughable to hear them speak about resigning. 8 of 10 Canadians will be better off, Madam Speaker. We're going to fight for Canadians at every step of the way, and Canadians know that, and they see the games that the Conservatives are playing this morning.
Honourable member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Well, Madam Speaker, let's test that hypothesis and call an election right now. After months of fighting this NDP Liberal government just to get the facts, we finally got some of the documents. The government's own analysis on the carbon tax shows that Canadians will lose nearly $30 billion, costing families $1,800 each year. Clearly, Canadians are not better off with this job-killing carbon tax. Everyone is paying more and getting less. This Liberal government is not worth the cost. The minister needs to take responsibility for hiding this information from Canadians. When will the Prime Minister be demanding his resignation?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
If the member opposite actually cares about the next generation, as we're looking into Father's Day, let's think about that. We're talking about taking responsibility today for our actions to make sure that we're passing over a healthy planet to our next generations. 8 out of 10 Canadians get more back from the climate rebate than they do pay in any kind of carbon pricing, but more importantly, we're making sure that we're protecting the planet for our children.
Member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Well, Madam Speaker, if that was true, why is this NDP Liberal government working so hard to cover up the documents that prove them wrong? It was only common sense Conservatives who forced this NDP Liberal government to reveal the truth, and the Liberals tried to discredit our own budget watchdog. But it was revealed that they were hiding the true cost of their carbon tax with secret documents and gag orders. These Liberals can run, but they can't hide from the true cost of their inflationary carbon tax. Canadians will lose nearly $30 billion a year. That's $1,800 for each Canadian family. The minister needs to face the consequences for this cover-up. When will the Prime Minister demand his resignation?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House.
Madam Speaker, this Environment Minister is the first Environment Minister in history to put forward a credible meet our 2050 net zero objectives and our Paris commitments. That member, you know what he should do? You know what they preferred, which would have remained secret? His premier, who scoured the universe, looked on the internet, got out his calculator, did all of that analysis that Scott Moe does, and said, you know what? The price on pollution is the cheapest way to go about fighting climate change and putting money in people's...
The Honourable Member for Regina Wascana.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost or the cover-ups. The Environment Minister has been saying all along that the carbon tax wouldn't cost us any money, or that it would even make money. But now we know the economy will lose $30.5 billion per year, or $1,800 per family, because of the carbon tax. Madam Speaker, when will the Environment Minister resign?
Good question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Clear, Madam Speaker, that question's been answered numerous times, but it's no surprise that Conservatives don't want to talk about their embarrassing vote against tax fairness. Well, can believe if you're flipping burgers, you should pay more tax than if you're flipping stocks or houses. With our plan, we're standing up for tax fairness. And let's just be clear, if you don't profit over $250,000 from an investment or the sale of an asset in a single year, you won't pay a cent more. If you make your hard-earned money on a paycheck, you won't pay a cent more. The Conservatives think hardworking Canadians pay tax on
Honourable Member for Regina Wascana.
Madam Speaker, when the Parliamentary Budget Officer asked the Minister's Department to provide its internal economic analysis of the carbon tax, the response included the following sentence: I request you to ensure that this information is used for your office's internal purposes only and is not published or further distributed. This is the gag order that the extremist Environment Minister placed on the Parliamentary Budget Officer, and this is why the Environment Minister must resign.
That's right.
When will he do it?
That's
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, it's clear that Conservatives don't care about the future of the planet. They don't care about tax fairness. They don't care about investments that Canadians need and rely on. They believe that if you're flipping burgers, you should pay more tax than if you're flipping homes or flipping stocks to make a living. You know, under our plan for tax, if you don't profit over $250,000 from an investment or the sale of property, you won't pay a cent more. If you make your hard-earned income on a paycheck, you won't pay a cent more. That's 99.87% of the population that won't pay a cent more. We think that the wealthiest should...
Speaker, that's the true cost to Canadian families from the Liberal NDP carbon tax that the Environment Minister tried so desperately to cover up. $1,800 cost to every household. It's no wonder the Environment Minister did his best to gag the Parliamentary Budget Officer and cover up the true cost of the carbon tax. Instead of sending a memo to the PBO demanding his silence, why doesn't the Environment Minister instead send a memo to the PMO with his resignation?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, that the Conservatives do not care about the future of our planet. They will not stand up for our children and our grandchildren. On this side of the House, we're advancing tax fairness for Canadians with our new capital gains regime. That means that if you're earning your paycheck or your hard-earned income on a paycheck, you won't pay a penny more. Unless you're earning over $250,000 a year from the sale of an asset, or other, you're going to pay more. You won't pay more. And Conservatives believe if you're flipping burgers, you should pay more tax than if you're flipping stocks or homes.
Honourable Member for Edmonton West.
The Liberal response to questions on more taxes is talking points adding more taxes. The Minister of the Environment interfered with the work of the Independent Parliamentary Budget Officer. He stood repeatedly in this House and misled Canadians that they would be better off financially with the carbon tax, all the while covering up the fact that the Liberal NDP carbon tax will cost Canadians more than $30 billion a year. Instead of working to increase the economic vandalism of the carbon tax, why doesn't the Environment Minister just do Canadians a favour and resign?